all bits of media, gaming, sport, and the technology associated with that.
And I'm John Footen. I'm a managing director at Deloitte Consulting. I'm responsible
for Google Cloud. And I am glad to have you all join us today, and very excited to welcome two of my friends and colleagues from the industry. We have with us today Richard Ellis, who's a managing partner at MTM, and John Footen, who's a managing director for media and entertainment at Deloitte. Good to have you both with us. Thanks. Richard, it would be great if you could perhaps give a little bit of an introduction on yourself.
And the technology associated with that.
And I'm John Footen. I'm a managing director at Deloitte Consulting. I'm responsible for Deloitte's practice in media technology and operations. I have been in the broadcasting industry now for around 30 years.
So to kick it off, maybe Richard, you could walk us through some of the results of the research and what you've learned.
Sure. So we went out over the summer and talked to CTOs and COOs and heads of audience insights all around the big media conglomerates in the US and Europe. And we were asking them three questions. First, we wanted to know, how has COVID impacted on audience behavior? Secondly, we were taking that and saying, okay, so with those changes in audience behavior, what are the implications of that for media companies? And finally, given all of that, what are the big priorities for these media companies going forwards as they try to deal with what's happening? I think we're going to start off by talking a little bit about what changed in audiences. I mean, the first thing to say is that the pandemic has fundamentally rewritten the structure for many industries, and media is one of them. When we look at how audiences and broadcasters and direct-to-consumer platforms respond, a lot of that is driven by what happened to the audience. Now, day one of the pandemic, the audience pretty much watched more of everything. People were stuck at home, they had more time on their hands, they were desperate to find out what was going on in the world. They consumed more of pretty much all media. That in turn, I think, is going to create an interesting trend in streaming media. I know that streaming services haven't shown signs of their subscriptions dropping back off yet. A lot of people we spoke with think that there's a good chance that will happen to a degree. It's for the last few years. But churn could easily become a thing for them in the next year or so. And they're going to be paying more attention to their churn data perhaps than they ever have before. And that is going to be prompted again by lack of disposable income. So there are some of the things that we've seen for sure. I think the final thing I'd mention is that we're seeing enormous stacking of these subscription services. About 6 or 7 services subscribed to by about a quarter of the UK population. It's quite similar. That's a lot of subscriptions, and the final trend that I think we'll see is an aggregator trend. We're going to see companies like Roku offering consumers with subscription fatigue, offering them a single subscription, a way into all these services to one route. I think it'll be the same with the telcos and the pay TV companies in Europe. That potentially is a way out for them. And it's certainly a trend that all our interviewees said that we're going to see over the next couple of years. A quick whiz through some of the audience trends and some of the consequences of that we've seen. John, are you seeing similar things in your work?
Absolutely. Actually, strikingly similar. Deloitte does a survey as well once per year of the United States and the media trends that we see in the US with regard to the survey. However, this year it was really unusual. We did the survey and then the pandemic hit while we were still processing the results of the survey. So about 6 to 8 weeks after the lockdown started, we went back in and surveyed the consumers again so that we could see what the changes were in lockdown versus the right before. And what we found was in the US that people had an average of 12 paid content subscriptions. Our definition includes everything from video subscriptions to music, but also gaming, information services like newspapers, magazines, podcasts. So we had an average across all generations, I should say, of 12. Millennials, strikingly, had 17 subscriptions on average in their households. 25% of those people reported that they were planning to adopt more services in the coming year. However, hold that thought, because your point about churn is well taken. Within all of these subscriptions, the average across all generations was that 3 of them were paid video streaming services at any given moment. And in looking at our survey this year, we still find that there are over 300 subscription services available in the US at this time. So, and we're not yet talking about the ad-free stuff that you were talking about. So what happened with COVID? Well, what happened during COVID is we found that 32% when COVID hit, they just added new services. They did it for multiple reasons. They did it because they were searching for new content. They did it because their household had their children at home more and they needed more children's services. They wanted more information, as you stated as well. We also saw traditional TV rising in people's time, specifically around news, even though there was a decline in sports consumption. And we also saw the ad revenue decline as well. So the average number of video services per household currently in the US after the COVID began is 4. So 4 paid subscription services. But what happened is that we had a real issue with, as you pointed out, with people's finances and what they wanted to do about that. So we have seen a massive increase in advertising supported streaming content and streaming options. So in our case, our data showed that there was an 18% increase in the number of AVOD signups. I wouldn't say subscribers, within a week. AVOD, I shouldn't even say VOD, because some of them are streaming services. So their advertising supported streaming services went up 18% in 1 week. And we think that there's actually a trend there that's longer term. It's not necessarily COVID dominated, because the other thing that has been happening over the last few years is that advertising has changed on digital. And I think traditional TV will be able to learn from this. Advertising has become less intrusive. It has
So news drove linear TV through the ceiling. But at the same time as linear TV's viewing went through the ceiling, their advertising revenues went through the floor. People also looked to the free services like Tubi and Pluto, who also saw triple-digit growth. And of course, they also turned to the streaming VOD services. Disney Plus hit its 4-year subscription targets in about 4 months. Netflix did a year of growth in a couple of months. We've never seen anything like that before. It's almost like what COVID did is it poured rocket fuel on an existing trend of the shift from linear to streaming. The data for the UK is very, very good. So it tells a really great story. And UK normally follows US. So it's also not a bad comparison. If you look around about the middle of that chart, you'll see the start of UK lockdown in the top 2 lines, which chart linear TV watching time. You see the 2020 line suddenly go through the roof, goes up about 20%.